Stewardship is a lifestyle of discipleship, and stewardship calls upon us to recognize that we all have abilities that are a gift from God. We are called to use our gifts to the best of our abilities to serve God and to serve each other. The disciple is one who has made a commitment to follow the followings of Jesus, the teachings of Jesus. And as we journey the last 2 months, we have focused on 4 spiritual practices of stewardship and how they create opportunity for us and others to be enriched in every way. Our journey has taken us to consider gratitude, commitment, discipline, and witness. Today in our worship, we will bring our journey to an end as we focus on a service of thanksgiving. To begin with, I'd like to acknowledge the territory on which we stand. As we gather this morning, we need to acknowledge that in this region, we live and work and worship on lands that are by law the unceded territories of the peoples of the Wabanaki Confederacy, predominantly the land of the Mi'kmaq, the Wolastoqey, and the Passamaquoddy. We're going to do our candle lighting now, Dave. Is there a video, I understand? Thanks, Dave. Are we doing that hymn as well, Janet? I said, are we singing that hymn as well? Okay. Don't often appreciate how difficult it is for Dave to try to navigate the information technology that sometimes works, sometimes doesn't. But, Dave's doing his best. We thank him for that. Daryl, will you please come up for the call to worship?
Call to worship. It is good to give thanks to God. Let us declare the steadfast love of God in the morning.
Speak of God's faithfulness.
With the music of instruments, our praise shall arise. For you, O Lord, have made us glad by your work. The opening prayer, please follow along. Jesus, you said that you were among us as one who serves. You washed the feet of your disciples, and in so doing, gave us an example of service. As we come to worship this day, help us to fully understand the example of service. Show us how to serve so that we can glorify you without calling attention to ourselves. Show us that in serving. Show us that in serving. Show us that in serving.
Jesus said, whoever wants to be first must be last of all and servant of all. Let us make our confessions about the ways we have been hesitant to serve the needs of the world. Holy One, help us to serve following the example of Jesus, who offered true service, not self-righteous service. Teach us to avoid the type of service that seeks to impress others, that seeks external rewards, that seeks to pick and choose who to serve, and that serves based on our moods and feelings. Where we have sought to serve others and have been insensitive to their needs, and where, in serving, we have humiliated or belittled others, forgive us. Help us to offer service that is grounded in our relationship with you, service that does not need to calculate results, and service that is based on the needs of others. Help us to have the mind of Christ and teach us your lifestyle of service. Friends, Jesus washed the feet of his disciples and gave them an example of servanthood. Know that Jesus, even today, washes our feet and enables us to walk the path that he sets before us. Thanks be to God. Ask Marion to come forward and read scripture for us.
Our first scripture reading today is taken from St. Paul's second letter to the Corinthians, chapter 9, verses 12 to 15. In these verses, Paul is encouraging the Corinthians to support the Christians in Jerusalem, and he explains why it's important to do this. The reading. Your ministry of this service to God's people isn't only fully meeting their needs, but it is also multiplying in many expressions of thanksgiving to God. They will give honor to God for your obedience to your confession of Christ's gospel. They will do this because this service provides evidence of your obedience and because of your generosity in sharing with them and with everyone. They will also pray for you, and they will care deeply for you because of the outstanding grace that God has given to you. Thank God for this gift from God that words can't describe. Thanks be to God. Our second reading is taken from the Gospel of John, chapter 13, verses 1 to 5. It is here that Jesus washes his disciples' feet shortly before his crucifixion. It was just before the Passover festival. Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the end. The evening meal was in progress, and evil had already prompted Judas, the son of Simon Iscariot, to betray Jesus. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. So he got up from the meal, took off his outer clothing, and wrapped a towel around his waist. After that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Thanks be to God.
Oh, need a minute to catch my breath now. Our sermon today is called "In Giving We Show That We Are Disciples," and is based on Marion's reading from 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verses 13 to 15. During the last several weeks, we've been reflecting on the discipline of giving. If you missed any of those weeks, I'll give you the short version of the Coles Notes version. I think I'm showing my age by calling it the Coles Notes version. I don't think that exists anymore. I think it's just called Googling now. In week 1, we highlighted the fact that the spiritual practice of gratitude can make a difference in us and influence how we live differently and reach out to the world. In week 2, Dave Lasky led the service, and we learned that giving goes beyond simple self-interest. It is a matter of a prolonged, patient, trusting commitment to God. Week 3, Diane led the service, I believe. We focused on the potential of giving to stir greater generosity when it springs from loving intention. Our 4th service was Carol, I believe, Carol Wallace. And we looked at God's economy of abundance, about how it's different from the world's, and what can happen when we root ourselves in the nature of God's economy. Today, we conclude our series reflecting on giving as a demonstration that we are disciples. Must you have more than you need before you are able to give? Are we disqualified from giving just because we only have enough ourselves? I've heard it said that in order to give, first you must have. Or in other words, in order to give, you must first be in a position where you have more than enough to give. The thing about that statement is that it seems to say that only a limited number of people can give or should give, and it seems to disqualify many of us from giving. Those who can give are the wealthy, or at least those with more than they need. However, those who do not have enough seem to be excused from giving. It's logical after all, I guess. If you do not have, how can you give? I guess in counterpoint to that, you look at giving across the country, charitable giving, and although most Atlantic provinces are considered to be so-called have-not provinces, we often lead the way in terms of charitable giving. So I don't think it's true that you have to have more than you need in order to give. Although that sounded logical, the writings of the Apostle Paul to the church of Corinth is saying something different. Paul places the qualification for giving not on whether we have an abundance or an excess. Instead, the only qualification for giving is being disciples of Jesus. It is because we are followers of Jesus that we are called upon to give to the work of God. But we need to be clear. Paul is not putting anyone under some sort of guilt trip. You are not a bad follower of Jesus if you cannot give. Neither is the apostle suggesting that we should give in ways that will harm or injure ourselves or others. We are not being called to give what we do not have. Indeed, the quantity of what is given is not considered. I think that bears repeating because we talk a lot about giving. The quantity of what is given is not considered. We are reminded that even the little that we can give should not be discounted nor taken for granted. Each time we give, it comes from the reality that we are followers of Jesus. We give because God has given to us. We give because God has given us the gift of Jesus. Our giving is in response to the gift that God has given to us all. As we consider this passage, consider at least 2 things about the context behind the letter, and the context is always important. First, remember as we read the passage that Paul is writing to the church in Corinth to encourage them to make a financial gift to the church of Jerusalem. The members of the Church of Corinth were not all wealthy people, of course. This was a church that had its own needs and may have needed help themselves. But the needs of the Church of Jerusalem were great, and the Apostle Paul was asking other churches to assist that church. So the church in Corinth was being encouraged to send an offering of love to the church in Jerusalem. The other thing that we need to remember is that the church in Corinth was made up of people who were not originally Jewish. The church in Jerusalem was made up largely of people who in fact were Jewish. There was a cultural and ethnic difference between those two churches. It had only been a short time since the church had agreed to allow non-Jewish persons to become members. The presence of non-Jewish persons was a new thing for the church. When we think about it, the only real connection between the church in Jerusalem and the church in Corinth was their belief that Jesus was the gift of God to the world. They believed that through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, that God had revealed God's love to the world. Although these churches were different in many ways, they were connected because in both places, people were followers of Christ, disciples of Jesus. It is because of their being disciples of Jesus that Paul makes his final appearance to the church in Corinth. Sorry, his final appeal. I don't know that he actually appeared to them. Might have appeared to be a little pushy, I suppose. He invites them to give based on their discipleship. Notice that his final appeal makes the following points. In giving, we show that we believe. In giving, we are serving God and others. And in giving, we are being channels of the grace of God. We can say that we give because the cause is good. Or we can say that we give because we have enough to spare. But these are not the reasons that Paul offers. He first suggests to the church that our giving should come from a desire to glorify God by displaying what we believe. Or, as we might say, putting your money where your mouth is. This may be what Paul is saying to the church. There are many ways that we can show that we believe and in whom we believe. However, it is when we are willing to put our faith in action that we really show others the truth of what we believe. Sometimes we need to show our faith in more ways than just speaking about it. When we give, we are also serving others. The word in the Common English Bible that we see as service is liturgia, from the original Greek. This word is also translated as worship. It is from the word that we get the word liturgy. The word means literally the service that the wealthy will make to those who are less fortunate. But it also means the service of the priests in the temple. So there's an interesting twinning of the word, and worship and service are intertwined. If we look at giving and service through that lens, we begin to see that in giving, we are serving others. And through this service, we are also worshiping God. In this regard, giving is also a fruit of discipleship. It is ultimately an act of worship, a worship that focuses on God. Yet in giving, we are worshiping God through showing our love for our fellow human beings. When we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, we give. When we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, we serve. When we love our neighbors as we love ourselves, we worship God. When we give, we become channels of the grace of God to others. Grace, remember, is the love of God. It is unmerited, it is unearned, it is undeserved, it is the love of God. In giving, we are allowing ourselves to be a way for the grace of God to reach others. Sometimes we do not even know just how far the smallest things that we do may make an impression or make a difference in somebody's life. Yet, in that act of giving, we become, in many ways, a means for others to know that God loves and that God cares. God has given to us the gift of Jesus. We celebrate this not only at Christmas, but also throughout the year. Because of this gift, we are called to be disciples of Jesus, to commit ourselves to follow the teaching and the example of Jesus living. It is because we are disciples that we give. Our giving comes not from a place of plenty or because we have more than enough to spare, although these may be true. We give because we are followers of Christ. Because we are disciples of Jesus, our giving becomes an opportunity to show our faith. Because we are disciples, our giving is an opportunity for us to serve others, and in so doing, to worship God. Because we are disciples, our giving offers to us an opportunity to be channels of the grace of God to others. This is a wonderful opportunity for each of us. May our discipleship lead us to give. May God indeed be glorified by our giving. 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 15 says, "Thank God for God's gift that words can't describe." Amen. As an invitation to the offering, let me offer you two very important words. Thank you. Thank you for the gifts that you are about to make, because I know they come from your faith in Jesus. Thank you for the ways you live your life, share your faith, and share yourselves. Now, together as Christ's church, let us thank God for God's indescribable gift. With hearts full of thanksgiving, let us offer our gifts of money to the service of God through our community of faith, the Mission and Service Fund of the United Church. We'll now take up the offering. Bless, O God, the gifts that we offer. As we offer them, we dedicate ourselves to you and your service. Help us as your disciples to give, to be committed, to be grateful, to be your witnesses, and to be thankful. In so doing, may the gifts which we bring glory to you. Amen.
Please pray with me this responsive prayer as you'll see it on the screen. Jesus said, "Ask and it will be given you. Search and you will find. Knock and the door will be opened for you." Trusting in your word and promises, we come asking, seeking, and knocking, not only for ourselves, but for the needs of the world around us. We lift in our prayer the world and all the peoples of the world. We remember especially before you the people who live in want, hunger, or need. Move us beyond sympathy to see the ways that we can serve them. You have given to us the gifts and talents to serve others. Help us to serve with thanksgiving, using the gifts you give. We remember those places where adequate medical care is not available to all. Places where otherwise treatable medical conditions can lead to prolonged illness or death. Move us beyond tears to see the ways that we can serve to help ensure medical care is available for all. You have given to us the gifts and talents to serve others. Help us to serve with thanksgiving, using the gifts you give. We remember those who are discriminated against because of their female and transgender, women who are given less pay for the same work as men, women and trans people who face humiliation and danger because of their bodies and their functions, all those who face abuse and violence in their homes. Move us beyond trying to ignore the cries for help, to see ways that we can serve so that all may live with dignity and joy. Help us to serve with thanksgiving, using the gifts you give. We remember those who are discriminated against because of their sexual orientation or gender identity. We hold before you those who are afraid to be themselves because the truth of who they are will lead to ostracism and abuse. We hold before you the memory of those who have been murdered because of fear and hate. Open our eyes to see the injustice that is being done and help us to serve so that tears may end and the joy of living restored. You have given to us the gifts and talents to serve others. Help us to serve with thanksgiving, using the gifts you give. We hold before you those who are harmed by the evils of racism and white privilege, those who, because of their race or the color of their skin, have been treated as less than human, as less than created in God's image, those lives that are less valued than others. Move us beyond willful denial. Help us to serve so that the ills of racism and white privilege may be healed. You have given to us the gifts and talents to serve others. And now, let us join together in the prayer that Jesus inspired for his disciples so long ago. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those that trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, power,
Go now into the world and give and live thankfully. Go offering your gifts and talents to serve God in the world. Go and help the weak and defenseless. Go showing the love of Jesus in all that you do. May God go with you.